Arjun Mehta sat in the back of a black town car, staring out the window as Mumbai's evening traffic crawled past. Horns blared, scooters weaved between buses, and the humid air clung to the glass like a second skin. He loosened his tie with one hand, the other gripping his phone. On the screen was a message from his mother. "Beta, the mandap is ready. Everyone is waiting. Don't be late," he sighed. Late? He was already 3 hours behind schedule. His flight from New York had been delayed, then customs took forever, and now this traffic. But more than the timing, it was the whole situation that weighed on him. At 38, he'd built a tech company from nothing, a sleek, fast-growing startup that investors called the next big thing. He'd skipped birthdays, holidays, even his best friend's wedding, all in the name of work. And now here he was, rushing to his own wedding, to a woman he'd never met. It wasn't supposed to be like this. When his parents first brought up marriage a year ago, he'd laughed. "I don't have time for that," he'd said over a crackling video call. "I'm not some village boy looking for a wife to cook dal for me." But his mother's voice had softened. "You're not getting younger, Arjun, and your father. He won't be here forever. He wants to see you settled." That last part got him. His father, once a proud school principal, now walked with a cane and napped through afternoons. Arjun couldn't say no to that, so he agreed, but with conditions. "She has to be educated, independent, someone who understands my world. No village girls in oversized saris who've never left their district," his parents promised. They sent a photo. A woman in a crisp white blouse standing in front of what looked like a university building, hair neatly tied back, glasses perched on her nose. She looked serious, intelligent. "She has a master's degree," his mother said. "Teaches English literature. Speaks fluent English, very modern." Arjun didn't fall in love with the photo, but he respected it. It felt safe, manageable, a partnership, not a fairy tale. They exchanged a few formal messages, polite, distant, and when the time came, he signed the marriage documents online without meeting her in person. After all, he told himself, this wasn't about romance. It was about family duty, ticking a box so his parents could sleep easy. Now, as the car finally pulled up to the wedding venue, a grand heritage hotel draped in marigolds and fairy lights, he felt a knot in his stomach. He stepped out, smoothed his suit, and walked toward the entrance. The air smelled of jasmine and incense. Relatives he hadn't seen in years rushed to greet him, clapping his back, calling him Dolha, the groom. He forced a smile, but his eyes scanned the crowd for her. Then he saw her. At the far end of the decorated courtyard, seated under a canopy of flowers, was a woman in a deep red sari. Her face was completely covered by a heavy veil, what they called a gung hat in traditional weddings. She sat perfectly still, hands folded in her lap, surrounded by older women who fussed over her like she was made of glass. From what he could see beneath the fabric, her sari was simple. No gold embroidery, no designer label. Her jewelry was minimal, small gold earrings, a thin chain. Nothing like the glamorous brides he'd seen at his friends' weddings in Delhi or London. His heart sank. This wasn't the woman from the photo. That woman wore blazers and carried a leather satchel. This one looked ordinary.
Maybe even plain.
The kind of woman his parents would have picked if they'd ignored his conditions entirely. A cold wave of anger rose in his chest. Had they lied to him? Was this some village girl they'd dressed up and passed off as modern? He thought of the photo again. Had it been photoshopped? Staged? He felt foolish, tricked, used. He turned to his cousin, who was standing nearby, grinning. "Who is that?" Arjun asked, voice low and tight. His cousin blinked. "Your bride, of course. Priya, isn't she lovely?" "Lovely?" Arjun almost laughed. "She looks like she's never seen a smartphone." His cousin's smile faded. "Hey, don't say that. She's sweet, quiet. Her father's sick, you know. She agreed to this marriage to help with his treatment. She's kind." Arjun didn't care about kind. He cared about compatibility. About not being stuck with someone who'd slow him down, who'd expect him to move back to India or give up his career. He'd worked too hard to be dragged into a life he didn't want. The wedding rituals began. Priests chanted in Sanskrit. Guests threw rice and petals. Arjun moved through the motions like a robot, tying the Mangal Sutra around her neck, circling the sacred fire, repeating vows he didn't feel. All the while he avoided looking at her. Every time he glanced in her direction, that veil seemed to mock him. What was she hiding? Was she ugly? Uneducated? Would she cry when she saw his penthouse in New York and realize she didn't belong? He imagined the headlines in his mind. Tech CEO trapped in backward marriage. His investors would question his judgment. His team would lose respect. His life, so carefully constructed, so perfectly controlled, was unraveling because of one impulsive yes to his parents. By the time the final ritual approached, the moment he was supposed to lift her veil and look into her eyes for the first time, Arjun had already made up his mind. He'd go through with the legal formalities, bring her to New York for appearances, then file for an annulment. Quietly, respectfully. No drama, but as he stood before her, the priest chanting blessings, the crowd hushed in anticipation. Something made him pause. Maybe it was the way she sat, so still, so dignified, despite knowing he hadn't spoken a word to her all day. Or maybe it was the faint tremor in her hands hidden beneath the folds of her sari. She wasn't crying. She wasn't begging. She was just there, accepting whatever came. He reached out slowly, fingers brushing the edge of her veil. The fabric was soft, slightly damp from the heat. He took a breath and lifted it, and froze. Beneath the veil wasn't the plain, timid girl he'd imagined. She had large, calm eyes the color of dark honey, framed by thick lashes. Her skin was warm and smooth, her features balanced and gentle. There was no makeup, just a faint bindi on her forehead and a touch of kajal around her eyes, but she didn't need any. She was beautiful in a way that didn't shout for attention. It simply was. But more than her looks, it was her expression that stunned him. She looked at him not with fear, not with hope, but with quiet clarity. As if she'd known exactly what he thought of her all along, and didn't blame him for it. For the first time all day, Arjun felt ashamed. He quickly lowered the veil again, murmuring a polite thank you to the priest. The crowd cheered. Cameras flashed. Someone shoved a glass of sweet lassi into his hand. He drank it without tasting it, his mind racing. Later, during the reception, he finally got a chance to speak to her, properly. They were seated at the head table, surrounded by relatives. He kept his voice low, almost cold. Why did you agree to this? She didn't flinch. My father needs surgery. The hospital in Ahmedabad requires payment up front. I teach, but my salary isn't enough. She spoke in clear, simple English with only a soft accent. Your parents said you were kind, that you'd understand. I'm not kind, he said bluntly. I'm busy. I live in New York. I don't have time for this. She nodded as if she'd expected that. I know. I don't expect anything from you. Just don't make it harder than it has to be. Her honesty disarmed him. He'd prepared for tears, demands, guilt trips. Not this quiet resignation. Over the next hour, he learned more. Her name was Priya. She taught at a government school in a small town near Vadodara. She'd never been on a plane before today. The photo his parents sent? It was real, but taken 5 years ago during her graduation. She'd worn that blouse only once. We don't have many nice clothes, she said simply. That was my best. He realized then his parents hadn't lied. They'd just edited the truth, made her sound more like what they thought he wanted. And Priya? She hadn't pretended to be someone else. She'd shown up as herself, humble, honest, and carrying the weight of her family's needs on her shoulders. As the night wore on, Arjun found himself watching her. She smiled politely at guests, accepted blessings with grace, and even helped an elderly aunt find her seat. There was a steadiness to her, a quiet strength he hadn't noticed at first. She wasn't flashy or loud, but she held her space with dignity. Still, the practical part of his brain kicked back in. This won't work, he told himself. She belongs here. I belong in boardrooms and airports. We're from different planets. But as he watched her gently adjust her veil after a breeze caught it, her fingers calm, her posture unshaken, he felt something shift inside him. Not love, not yet, but doubt. Doubt in his own assumptions. Doubt in the story he'd told himself all day. When the wedding ended and guests began to leave, his mother pulled him aside. You'll take her to America, right? Just for a few months. Let people see you're married. He looked at Priya, standing alone near the exit, holding a small suitcase. She looked tired but not broken. Ready for whatever came next, he nodded. Yes, I'll take her. But as he said it, he wasn't sure if he was doing it for his parents, or because, for the first time, he wanted to see who she really was beneath the veil. Not just her face, but her heart. The car ride to the hotel was silent. Outside, Mumbai's lights blurred into streaks of gold and red. Inside, two strangers sat side by side, bound by a promise neither had fully understood, and a future neither could predict. The morning after the wedding, the hotel room felt too quiet. Sunlight filtered through the heavy curtains, casting soft rectangles on the marble floor. Arjun sat at the small desk near the window, scrolling through urgent emails on his laptop. His flight back to New York was in 36 hours, and his team needed final approval on a product launch. He hadn't slept much. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw her face, the calm eyes, the quiet dignity, and the shame returned, sharp and unexpected. Priya was already awake. She'd made her bed neatly, folded her sari from the night before, and now sat cross-legged on the armchair reading a worn paperback. She hadn't spoken unless spoken to. She hadn't asked for anything. Not even breakfast. Arjun cleared his throat. There's room service. You can order whatever you want. She looked up, surprised. Oh, thank you. She hesitated. But is it included? He almost laughed. Yes, it's fine. She nodded slowly, then set her book aside. Just tea, please, with milk. And maybe some toast? He called it in, then turned back to his screen. But he couldn't focus. He kept glancing at her. She held the book like it was precious, fingers tracing the spine, eyes moving slowly across the page. He squinted. Letters to a Young Poet by Rilke, in English. You read Rilke? He asked, more out of curiosity than conversation. She looked up again, a little shy. I like his thoughts on solitude and purpose. She paused. Do you read? Not much. Mostly reports news. She smiled faintly. Maybe you'd like him. He writes about how hard things shape us. He didn't answer, but something about the way she said it, like she'd lived those hard things, stuck with him. When breakfast arrived, she ate slowly, carefully, as if savoring each bite. He watched her stir sugar into her tea, the spoon clinking softly against the cup. There was a grace in her movements, unhurried and deliberate. It reminded him of his grandmother, who used to say, "Haste is the enemy of peace." Later that day, they had to visit his parents' home for post-wedding rituals. His mother fussed over Priya, adjusting her palu, whispering instructions. His father sat in his favorite armchair, smiling weakly. You look happy together, he said, though his eyes lingered on Arjun with quiet concern. Arjun forced a smile. We're fine, Papa. But during the small ceremony, tying a red thread around their wrists for blessings, Priya's hand brushed his. Her skin was warm, steady, and when their eyes met, she didn't look away. There was no plea in her gaze, no expectation, just presence. On the drive back to the hotel, Arjun finally asked the question that had been burning in him. Why didn't you tell me the truth before the wedding? That you weren't like the photo? She was quiet for a long moment. Outside, Mumbai buzzed, honking rickshaws, street vendors calling out, the smell of frying samosas drifting through the open window. I didn't think it mattered, she said finally. You weren't marrying me for my looks. You were marrying to fulfill a duty, and I needed the help. So I came, she turned to him. But I never lied. I just didn't correct your parents' story. He felt a lump in his throat. She was right. He hadn't asked for honesty. He'd asked for convenience. That evening, his cousin called. So, what's she like? Arjun hesitated. She's not what I expected, better or worse. He thought of her reading Rilke, her quiet strength. The way she'd thanked the hotel staff in perfect English. Different, he said. The next morning, they packed. Priya had only 2 small suitcases, one with her clothes, the other with books and a framed photo of her father. Arjun noticed she'd wrapped the frame in an old sari to protect it. At the airport, she moved through security with quiet efficiency. She'd never flown before, but she didn't ask questions. She watched others, copied their actions, removing shoes, placing her bag on the belt, waiting patiently. When they boarded, she sat by the window, eyes wide as the plane taxied down the runway. As Mumbai shrank below them, Arjun saw her press her palm against the cool glass. A single tear rolled down her cheek, but she wiped it away quickly as if embarrassed. First time leaving home? He asked gently. She nodded. My father's never been on a plane either. I wish he could see this. He didn't know what to say. So he just handed her a pair of noise-canceling headphones from his bag. It'll be quieter with these. She accepted them with a small, thank you. and for the rest of the flight, she listened to soft instrumental music staring out at the clouds. New York hit her like a wall of noise and light. The cold air, the towering buildings, the rush of people speaking a dozen languages. It was overwhelming. Arjun watched her take it all in, her eyes wide but not afraid, just observing. He took her to his apartment, a sleek penthouse in Midtown with floor-to-ceiling windows and minimalist furniture. Everything was white, gray, and steel. No photos, no plants, no clutter. "This is where you'll stay," he said, gesturing to the guest room. "I'll be in the other wing. I have a hotel suite nearby for work, so I won't be here much." She nodded, taking in the space. "It's very clean," he almost smiled. "That's one way to put it." He showed her the kitchen, the laundry, the thermostat. "If you need anything, just text me. Or call the building concierge." She thanked him again, always thanking him, as if she were a guest in her own marriage. That night he stayed at his usual hotel, but he couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about her sitting alone in that vast empty apartment. So the next morning he stopped by with coffee and pastries from a bakery downstairs. She was already up, dressed in simple cotton pants and a kurta, hair tied back. She'd made the bed, wiped the counters, and even watered the single potted plant on the balcony, something he hadn't touched in months. "You didn't have to do that," he said. "It's nice to care for a space," she replied, simply. They sat at the breakfast bar. He watched her tear her croissant slowly, dipping pieces into her coffee. "Do you miss home already?" She thought for a moment. "Yes, but I also feel curious, like I'm standing at the edge of something new." He respected that. Most people would have been crying or demanding to go back. Not her. Over the next few days, a strange routine formed. He'd stop by in the mornings before work, drop off groceries or a note about the Wi-Fi password. She'd leave the apartment spotless, sometimes with a small sticky note on the fridge. Used the blue mug. Washed it. Or took out the recycling. One afternoon, he came home early. His meeting had been canceled, and found her sitting on the balcony, wrapped in a shawl, reading. The city stretched out below, glittering in the late sun. "You're always reading," he said, stepping outside. She closed the book. "It's how I learn, and how I stay calm." "What are you reading now?"
The Alchemist.
"It's about listening to your heart." He raised an eyebrow. "Do you believe in that?" "I believe in trying," she said. Even when it's hard, he sat beside her. For the first time, the silence between them didn't feel heavy. It felt peaceful. Then one evening, he came home to find the apartment filled with the smell of spices. He followed the scent to the kitchen and stopped in the doorway. Priya stood at the stove, stirring a pot of dal. She wore an apron over her kurta, her hair slightly messy. On the counter were bowls of rice, chopped tomatoes, fresh coriander. "I hope you don't mind," she said, turning. "I found some lentils in the pantry, and I thought maybe you'd like a home-cooked meal." He hadn't had dal in months. Not real dal, made with cumin, turmeric, and that special touch his mother used to add. The smell alone brought back memories of childhood Sundays. He sat at the table without a word. She served him quietly, then sat across from him with her own plate. He took a bite, and almost groaned. It was perfect. "Warm, comforting, full of flavor. This is amazing," he said, genuinely surprised. She smiled, a real smile this time, soft and warm. "My mother's recipe." She said, "Food is love you can taste." He ate in silence for a while, then asked, "Why are you being so kind to me?" "After how I treated you?" She looked at him, her eyes steady. "Because I believe everyone deserves kindness, even when they don't ask for it." He didn't know how to respond to that, so he just ate, and for the first time since the wedding, he felt something shift, not just in the room, but inside himself. Later that week, he noticed something else. She'd started leaving the apartment during the day. At first, he thought she was sightseeing, but one afternoon he saw her return with a tote bag full of books and a tired but satisfied look on her face. "Where do you go?" he asked. She hesitated, then said, "There's a community center downtown. They needed volunteers for their after-school program. I help kids with reading and math." He stared at her. "You're volunteering? You just got here." "I needed something to do," she said simply. "And the kids? They remind me of my students back home." He felt a strange mix of admiration and guilt. While he'd been avoiding her, she'd been building a life, quietly, purposefully. That weekend, he found a brochure on the kitchen counter. "Evening English classes for adults." Enroll today. Her name was scribbled on the registration line. You're taking classes? He asked. I want to speak better, she said. Not just for you. For me, he nodded slowly. You already speak well, but I want to understand more. The news, books, people on the subway. She smiled. Language is a bridge, isn't it? He looked at her, really looked, and saw not a homely bride or a burden, but a woman with dreams, discipline, and quiet courage. She wasn't waiting for him to save her. She was saving herself one small step at a time. And for the first time, Arjun wondered if he was the one who needed saving. From his own pride, his assumptions, his lonely, polished life. He didn't say any of that. But that night, before he left for his hotel, he paused at the door. Stay as long as you need, he said. This is your home, too. She looked up from her book, surprised. Then she nodded, her eyes shining just a little. And in that moment, beneath the hum of the city and the quiet ticking of the clock, something real began. Not with grand gestures, but with a shared meal, a borrowed book, and the simple act of seeing someone for who they truly are. Weeks passed, and the apartment stopped feeling like two separate worlds under one roof. It started with small things. Arjun began coming home earlier. Not every night, but often enough that Priya stopped eating dinner alone. She'd leave a plate covered with foil on the counter, and he'd find it waiting when he walked in, tired from meetings, but somehow lighter knowing someone had thought of him. He noticed other changes too. The single potted plant on the balcony, once drooping and pale, now had new green shoots. A small shelf near the kitchen held her books neatly arranged. And on the fridge, instead of just notes about chores, there were little drawings now. A smiling sun, a cat with big eyes, a stick figure version of him holding a laptop. She must have made them with the kids at the community center. One rainy Tuesday, he came home to find her sitting at the dining table with a stack of worksheets, a red pen in hand. Her hair was loose and she wore thick socks and an oversized sweater he'd never seen before. Grading papers? He asked, hanging up his coat. She looked up, startled. Oh, I didn't hear you come in. Yes, these are for my adult English class. We're practicing writing short stories. He poured himself a glass of water and sat across from her. You're teaching now? Not officially. But the teacher asked if I could help correct assignments. She said my grammar is strong. She smiled shyly. I told her I learned by reading library books under a streetlight because our house didn't have electricity until I was 12. He stared at her. You grew up without electricity? She nodded, unfazed. Many villages still do. But we had stars and stories. My grandmother used to tell us folk tales every night. That's how I fell in love with words. He couldn't imagine it. No screens, no internet, just voices in the dark weaving magic. His own childhood had been full of gadgets and tutors, but it suddenly felt empty in comparison. You never talk about your life back home, he said. I didn't think you'd care, she replied simply. I do, he said, and meant it. She studied him for a moment, then closed her notebook. My father was a school teacher too, in a one-room schoolhouse. He taught math with stones and sticks because they couldn't afford books. When I was 10, he sold his watch, a gift from his own father, to buy me a dictionary. Said, words are your passport, Beta. Use them well. Arjun felt something tighten in his chest. He'd bought his last watch for $20,000 and barely remembered why. What about your mother? He asked. Priya's expression softened. She passed away 5 years ago. Cancer. We didn't have money for proper treatment. She looked down at her hands. That's why I said yes to this marriage. My father's heart is weak now. The doctors in Ahmedabad say he needs surgery soon. I couldn't raise the money alone. Arjun was silent. All this time he'd been worried about his image, his career, his comfort, while she'd been carrying the weight of her father's life on her shoulders. And she'd never once asked him for a single rupee. Why didn't you tell me? He asked quietly. Because I didn't want your pity, she said. I wanted your respect. Or at least, your space. He didn't know what to say, so he just sat there, listening to the rain tap against the windows, feeling smaller than he had in years. The next day, he did something unexpected. He called his assistant and asked her to research top cardiac hospitals in India. Not just any hospitals, but the best. Then he quietly transferred a large sum into a separate account, labeled only medical family. He didn't tell Priya. Not yet. He wasn't sure how she'd take it. Pride ran deep in both of them. Instead, he started showing up at the community center. He told himself it was just to check in on her. But really, he wanted to see her in her element. He stood in the back of the classroom one afternoon, watching her kneel beside a young boy struggling to sound out a word. Her voice was patient, encouraging. "Try again. You're so close," the boy beamed when he got it right. "Did you hear that, sir?" He called out to Arjun. "I did it!" Arjun smiled. "I did. Great job." After class, Priya walked over, surprised. "You came." "I was nearby," he lied. "Thought I'd see what you do all day." She raised an eyebrow but didn't call him out. "Want to help tomorrow?" "We're making storybooks. The kids draw pictures and we write the words." He almost said no. He had a board meeting, a call with investors, 100 reasons to leave. But then he remembered the boy's proud face. "Sure," he said. The next day, he showed up in a crisp shirt and slacks, looking wildly out of place among the colorful posters and tiny chairs. The kids stared at him like he was a movie star. "Is he your husband?" one little girl asked Priya loudly. Priya turned pink. "Yes." "Does he know how to draw?" Arjun laughed. "Not really," but Priya handed him a crayon anyway. "Everyone can draw something." So he sat on the floor, surrounded by children, and drew a lopsided dog. The kids laughed, not at him but with him. One boy added wings to it. "Now it's a flying dog," he declared. For the first time in years, Arjun felt light, not in control, not performing, just present. After that, he started coming more often. Sometimes he'd read aloud from picture books. Other times, he'd help organize donated supplies. The center's director, a warm woman named Mrs. Gupta, pulled him aside one day. "You've changed," she said, "less sharp around the edges." He didn't argue. At home, things kept shifting. One evening, he found Priya struggling with a video call on his laptop. Her father's face filled the screen, frail but smiling. "Papa," she said, her voice bright. "This is Arjun, my husband." The old man nodded slowly. "You take care of my daughter?" Before Arjun could answer, Priya said, "He's been very kind." The man's eyes softened. "Good. She deserves kindness." After the call ended, Arjun stood in the doorway, unsure if he should stay or go. "He's getting weaker," Priya said quietly, not looking at him. "The doctor says next month is best for surgery." Arjun took a breath. "I've set aside money for it. For the hospital, the travel, everything." She turned, eyes wide. "You did what?" "I didn't want you to worry," he said quickly. "It's not charity, it's family." She stared at him, tears welling up, but she didn't cry. Instead, she walked over and placed a hand on his arm. "Thank you," she said, voice thick. "But I need to earn my way. Even in this." He understood then. It wasn't about the money. It was about dignity. So they made a plan. She'd keep teaching. He'd cover the medical costs as a loan to be repaid once she started earning more. She agreed, but only after he promised not to treat her like a burden. Around the same time, something unexpected happened at work. A major client pulled out of a deal, citing ethical concerns about their data practices. Then a tech blog published an article questioning their privacy policies. Within days, their stock dropped and 2 key engineers quit. Arjun worked late every night trying to contain the fallout. He snapped at his team, canceled meetings, and barely ate. One evening, he came home past midnight, exhausted and frustrated, to find the living room dark, except for a single lamp glowing near the couch. Priya was there, curled up with a book, but she'd left a plate of food on the table, still warm, and a mug of ginger tea. "You didn't have to wait up," he muttered, running a hand through his hair. "I know," she said, "but you looked like you needed someone too." He sat heavily at the table, pushing his untouched dinner around. "It's falling apart," he admitted, voice low. "Everything I built, it might all be for nothing." She didn't offer empty comfort, didn't say it'll be okay. Instead, she sat across from him and asked, "What's the right thing to do?" He looked up. "What? If you weren't worried about money or reputation, what would be the right thing?" He thought about it. "We cut corners on user consent. We collected more data than we needed. It wasn't illegal, but it wasn't honest." "Then fix it," she said simply. "Not to save your company, to save your conscience." Her words hit him like cold water. He'd been so focused on damage control, he'd forgotten why he started the company in the first place. To build something useful, something good. The next morning, he called an emergency meeting. He told his team the truth: they'd lost their way. And they were going to rebuild, with transparency, with ethics, with real user respect. Some investors balked, but others stayed, impressed by his honesty. That night he came home and found Priya waiting with 2 cups of tea. "How'd it go?" she asked. "I think I just burned my bridges," he said. "Or built new ones," she replied. He smiled for the first time in days. As the weeks went on, their life settled into a rhythm that felt less like coexistence and more like partnership. They cooked together on Sundays. She taught him how to make proper chai. Not too sweet, not too strong. Just right. He showed her how to use the espresso machine, laughing when she made it too bitter. One Saturday, they walked through Central Park. She stopped to watch a street musician play the violin. "It sounds like rain," she said. He watched her face, the wonder in her eyes, and realized he hadn't truly looked at her since the wedding day. Not with judgment, not with suspicion, but with curiosity, with care. Later, over coffee, he asked, "Do you ever miss your old life?" She stirred her cup slowly. "Parts of it. The quiet. The stars. My students." She looked at him. "But I don't regret coming here. Because I've learned something important." "What's that?" "That home isn't just a place," she said. "It's the people who see you and still choose to stay." He didn't answer right away. But when they got back to the apartment, he didn't go to his usual side of the living room. He sat beside her on the couch, shoulder to shoulder, as they read in comfortable silence. And for the first time, the space between them didn't feel like distance. It felt like the beginning of something real. The calm didn't last. It never does when you're building something real. Arjun thought the worst was over: the client fallout, the public doubt, the sleepless nights rewriting company policy. He'd even started to feel proud of the changes. They'd launched a new privacy dashboard, gave users full control over their data, and published a plain language transparency report. Some tech blogs called it a rare act of corporate courage. Investors were cautiously returning. Then the email came. It arrived at 3 a.m., flagged as urgent. A former employee, a senior engineer Arjun had trusted, had leaked internal documents to a major news outlet. Not just about data practices, but about a secret project, an AI tool that could predict user behavior with frightening accuracy, built using data collected without clear consent. The headline the next morning was brutal: "Tech CEO's ethical reboot built on deception." By noon, his phone wouldn't stop ringing. His board demanded an emergency call. Social media exploded. One viral post showed a side-by-side. His recent interview saying users come first, next to an old internal memo saying, "Optimize for engagement, not ethics." He sat in his office, blinds drawn, staring at the wall. The company he'd poured his life into was crumbling. Not because of market forces, but because of his own past choices. He'd cut corners when no one was watching. And now everyone was watching. He didn't go home that night. He stayed in the office, trying to draft a response, but every word felt hollow. What could he say? "I'm sorry" wouldn't fix the betrayal people felt. It wasn't illegal, sounded like an excuse. He'd built a reputation on being sharp, in control, untouchable, and now he felt like a fraud. Back at the apartment, Priya waited. She'd seen the news. Everyone had. But she didn't call, didn't text. She just left his favorite dal on the stove, covered, and a note: "Eat when you're ready." He came home the next evening, unshaven, eyes bloodshot. He expected silence, maybe even anger. Instead, she handed him a warm towel and said, "Shower first, then talk." He almost broke right there. Over a simple dinner of rice and yogurt, his stomach too knotted for anything heavier, he told her everything. The pressure to grow fast. The meetings where he'd nodded along while his team suggested gray area tactics. The moment he'd signed off on the AI project, telling himself, "Everyone does it." "I thought I was being smart," he said, voice rough. "But I was just scared. Scared of failing, scared of not being enough." She listened without interrupting. When he finished, she didn't offer solutions. Didn't say it'll be okay. She just reached across the table and covered his hand with hers. Her palm was warm, steady. "You built something from nothing," she said quietly. "That doesn't vanish because of one mistake. Or even 10. He looked at her, surprised. "How can you say that? After everything I've done?" "Because I've seen you try to fix it," she said. "Most people would have hidden. You stood up. That matters." Her words didn't erase the crisis, but they gave him something he hadn't felt in days, a sliver of hope. The next morning, he called his legal team, not to bury the story, but to prepare a full disclosure. He wanted to admit everything, the good, the bad, the ugly. His lawyers warned him it could mean lawsuits, even criminal investigation. Then so be it, he said. That afternoon, he sat down and wrote a letter. Not a corporate statement, but a real one. He talked about his father, who taught him that a man's word is his wealth. He admitted his failures plainly. He outlined every step they'd take to make things right. Deleting the AI model, refunding affected users, creating an independent ethics board. And he ended with this: I don't expect forgiveness, but I promise to earn back your trust one honest day at a time. He posted it on the company blog at midnight. Within hours, the response was overwhelming. Some called him a coward, others a rare leader with guts. But the most surprising messages came from ordinary users. Thank you for treating us like humans. I'll give you another chance. This is how change starts. Still, the damage was deep. 2 major partners pulled out. His stock price dropped 40%. His board asked him to step down temporarily. He agreed. That night, he came home feeling hollowed out. He'd given up control, the one thing he'd always clung to. He expected to feel lost. Instead, he felt lighter. Priya was waiting on the balcony, wrapped in a shawl, watching the city lights. She didn't say anything when he joined her, just handed him a cup of tea. After a long silence, he said, I might lose everything. She looked at him, her eyes reflecting the glow of distant skyscrapers. What's everything? He frowned. My company, my reputation, my life's work. And what about your integrity? She asked gently. Your peace? Your ability to look your father in the eye? He didn't answer. But he knew she was right. Over the next week, as the world debated his fate, something unexpected happened at home. Priya didn't treat him like a fallen king. She treated him like a person. She made his favorite meals, left encouraging notes in his briefcase, even played soft music in the evenings to help him sleep. One night he found her at the kitchen table, writing furiously in a notebook. What's that? He asked. She hesitated, then showed him. It was a proposal, a plan to bring digital literacy to rural schools in India. Simple tablets preloaded with offline lessons in math, science, and English. Teachers could use them even without internet. I've been talking to my old school, she said. They have one broken computer for 200 students. Kids are smart, they just don't have tools. He read through it, stunned by how practical it was. Low cost, scalable, rooted in real need. This is brilliant, he said. She shrugged. It's just an idea. No, he said, looking at her. It's exactly the kind of thing my company should support. Not for PR, because it's right. Her eyes lit up. You'd really do that? If I still have a company, he said with a small smile. But even if he didn't, he realized he could help her build this. With his experience, her heart, they could create something that actually mattered. A few days later, his board called. They'd reviewed the public response, the user feedback, the steps he'd taken. They decided to keep him as CEO, but with new oversight. A chance to rebuild not just the business, but its soul. He accepted, not with triumph, but with humility. That evening, he took Priya out, not to a fancy restaurant, but to a small Indian diner they'd never tried. Over steaming plates of chola bhature, he told her the news. She listened, then said, I'm proud of you. He shook his head. I couldn't have done it without you, she smiled. You did the hard part. I just reminded you who you are. Later, walking home under the streetlights, he finally asked the question that had been growing in him for weeks. Why did you stay? He said, when I was cold. When I barely looked at you. When I treated you like a mistake. Why didn't you leave? She stopped walking, looked up at him, her expression calm but serious. Because I saw something in you, she said. Not the CEO, not the success. The man underneath, the one who still cares even when he's scared. I stayed because I believed you'd find your way back to him. He swallowed hard. And if I hadn't? Then I would have walked away, she said simply. But not before giving you the chance. Her honesty hit him like a wave. She hadn't stayed out of duty or fear. She'd stayed out of hope. And that was the most powerful kind of love. The kind that sees your broken pieces and still believes you can be whole. When they got home, He didn't go to his usual side of the apartment. He stood by the window watching the city pulse below, and she joined him, shoulder to shoulder. No words were needed. In the quiet, he realized something. The crisis hadn't broken him. It had stripped him bare, and in that emptiness he'd found something real. Not just a marriage, but a partnership. Not just a life, but a purpose. And for the first time, he wasn't building for applause. He was building for meaning. With her beside him, that felt like enough. 6 months had passed since the storm. The city outside looked the same, tall buildings, honking cabs, people rushing with coffee in hand, but inside, everything had changed. Arjun stood on the rooftop garden of his building, watching the sunset paint the sky in soft oranges and purples. The air was cool, quiet, just the distant hum of traffic below. In his hand, he held 2 envelopes. One was thin, official, stamped with legal letterhead. The other was thicker, filled with sketches, budgets, and a simple mission statement. Every child deserves a key to the future. He'd spent the morning finalizing the paperwork for Priya's education project. They'd named it Lightbox, after the idea that even in the darkest village, a small light of knowledge could change everything. The first pilot would launch in 3 schools near her hometown. Tablets were being loaded with lessons in local languages. Teachers were being trained. And for the first time, Arjun's company wasn't just selling software. It was giving something real back. But that wasn't why he'd asked her to meet him up here tonight. He heard the door open behind him. She stepped out wearing a soft blue kurta and a light shawl, her hair loose around her shoulders. She smiled when she saw him. "You wanted to talk?" He nodded, suddenly nervous. It was strange, after everything they'd been through. After nights of honest talks and shared silences. This moment felt heavier than any boardroom negotiation. "Come sit," he said, gesturing to the small table with 2 chairs and a single string of fairy lights overhead. She sat, folding her hands in her lap. "Is everything okay with Lightbox?" "It's more than okay," he said. "It's amazing. The team's excited. The schools are ready." He paused. "But I wanted to talk about us." She looked at him, calm but curious. He took a breath and slid the first envelope across the table. "This is the divorce filing." Her eyes flickered just for a second, but she didn't reach for it. "I see. I never filed it," he said quickly. "I kept it, just in case. But I realized something." He met her gaze. "I don't want out. I want in, fully, not because my parents expect it. Not because it's convenient, but because I choose you." She didn't speak right away. She looked out at the skyline, the city lights beginning to twinkle in the dusk. "You've changed," she said softly. "So have you," he replied. "You came here as a stranger, carrying your father's hopes and your own quiet strength. And you didn't just survive, you built something beautiful. You reminded me what matters." She turned back to him, her eyes glistening. "I didn't do it for you." "I know," he said. "And that's why it meant so much. You didn't need me to be your hero. You just needed me to see you." A small smile touched her lips. "And did you?" "I'm still learning," he admitted. "But every day I see more." He pushed the second envelope toward her. "This is for Lightbox. Full funding. A dedicated team. And," he hesitated, "I want you to lead it. Not as my wife. As its founder. Your name on the letterhead. Your vision guiding it." She opened it slowly, scanning the pages. Her fingers trembled slightly. "This is more than I dreamed." "It's less than you deserve," he said. "But it's a start." She closed the folder and looked at him. Really looked. At the lines around his eyes. The quiet sincerity in his voice. The man he'd become not through success, but through humility. Then she did something unexpected. She took the divorce papers, tore them slowly in half, then in half again, until they were just scraps in her hands. She let them fall to the ground like confetti. "I don't want a divorce," she said. "I want a marriage. The real kind, where we stand side by side, not because we have to, but because we want to." Relief washed over him, warm and deep. He reached across the table and took her hand. Her fingers curled around his, familiar now, like they'd always belonged there. They sat in silence for a while, watching the last light fade. Later they walked down to the street together. No driver, no car, just 2 people strolling through the city they'd both learned to call home. They passed food carts, Street musicians, couples laughing under awnings. At one point, a little girl selling roses ran up to them. "Flower for your wife, sir?" Arjun smiled and bought two. He handed one to Priya. She tucked it behind her ear, and he thought, not for the first time, how beautiful she was. Not in the flashy way the world often celebrates, but in the way that settles deep in your bones and makes you want to be better. They ended up in Central Park, sitting on a bench near the lake. The water shimmered under the moonlight. Ducks glided silently across the surface. "I called my father today," she said. "He's doing well after the surgery. He asked about you." "What did you tell him?" "That you're stubborn," she teased, "but kind, and that you make terrible chai unless I supervise," he laughed. "Fair." She leaned her head gently against his shoulder. He said, "If she's happy, then I'm at peace." Arjun wrapped an arm around her. "I hope I keep making you happy." "You already do," she said. "Not by grand gestures, but by showing up, by listening, by choosing me, even on hard days." He thought about how far they'd come, from strangers bound by duty to partners who'd weathered fire and found something real in the ashes. They didn't talk about the future in big promises. No forever speeches. Just quiet certainty. When they finally stood to leave, he didn't let go of her hand. They walked back through the park gates, past streetlights and sleepy cafes. Two people who'd once been worlds apart but now moved through life in step. Back at the apartment, he made tea while she watered the plants on the balcony, now lush with green leaves and even a few flowers. She'd named them. One was hope. Another was patience. He brought her a cup and stood beside her, looking out at the city. "You know," he said, "I used to think success was a number in a bank account, or a headline, or a corner office. And now?" she asked. "Now I think it's this," he said, nodding at the quiet moment, the shared warmth, the life they were building, not perfect, but true. She smiled and leaned into him. "Me too." Later that night, as they got ready for bed, he found an old photo on his phone, the one his parents had sent before the wedding. The blurry, staged picture of her in a white blouse. He almost deleted it, but then he didn't, because that photo wasn't a lie. It was just the beginning. The real story was written in late-night talks, shared meals, quiet acts of courage, and the choice every single day to see each other clearly. And stay anyway. And as he turned off the light, hearing her soft breathing from the next room, he knew. This wasn't the end of their story. It was the first real page.